which we call a barrel roll, is how we chase the back. Once we've established some form of rotational control, but we don't have our full hooks in, we haven't completed the position, our partner's starting to roll away from us. Let's actually do an example from here of how this could go a bit wrong. Is, let's say I've got a hook in and maybe I've got a seatbelt and I'm trying to pull Rory towards me and he rolls away from me and just keep rolling, and that sort of thing can happen to you. So if I don't have a plan for chasing Rory when he starts to roll, and that roll was very slow and gentle. When people do this, they explode and they roll to try to get their back to the floor, to try to regain a guard. So understand this movement has to be done rather quickly if we want to be successful. And there are different iterations of it. We're just doing it from a hook.
And you gotta be ready for this kind of movement, because as we kind of touched upon in the last video, when I'm here positioned against Rob, even without that hook, I have the option of turning my back this way, which doesn't really do fucking all for me. Like, Rob's just gonna continue to attack my back, and as we talked about the ways that Rob can drive force into me, he can make it very difficult for me to turn that way. I will not.
Like, that's not a good idea.
So usually, unless good guys, you're gonna be able to go both directions and force dilemmas on you. But if I'm here and Rob's starting to come towards me, if I can turn my back as far away from him as possible, I reduce back exposure. So even though my back is off the mat right now, we can see that because my chest is pointing towards Rob, he's got a much longer distance he has to travel to somehow get to my back and occupy that space with just the back connection. So, as Rob's attacking, this is why people will be dropping that far shoulder and trying to barrel roll away.
So if I've already got a seatbelt, or I've already got a motorcycle grip, this is much easier to do because I've got some element of rotational control. But I can still fail if, when Rory starts to drop his hip, if I just step and my arm's kind of caught, ease up on it because I gotta take my elbow out, there we go. And we'll end up in a position that's usually some form of half guard, maybe quarter guard, whatever. It's extremely common for people's initial reaction to their opponent's movement
To try to stop it.
is to stop it. Yeah, and the easiest way to do that is just to plant your foot, and so that's because it's such a rudimentary movement. It's hard to get people over that idea. What we want to do, as soon as we feel that our partner is starting to drop their hip, is just put our knee in front of their hip. So I'm creating a fulcrum, and as we roll, my knee ends up underneath of his hip. Right? So again, when we do this normally, it's going to happen quite quickly, but as long as we meet this condition, the rate of speed shouldn't matter, provided I got here first. So that's the only part that has to definitely be quick. I've got to beat him to the angle where my knee is on the floor underneath his hip. And then we would continue to roll. I've already got the motorcycle grip. Because he's busy rolling, his legs will tend to be more disengaged from his torso than normal. And I'll usually just be able to insert my hook in as we go. It's actually quite a bit easier to get that hook in motion than it is under static circumstances. So if we go a little bit quicker as Rory rolls, I go here and you can see how my hook comes in at the end and I end up with everything that I wanted to begin with. This movement can also be performed without the hook in, provided I've got some form of upper body connection. So I'm not going to do this if I'm here or I'm just here. But if I did manage to work to a seatbelt or a motorcycle grip, as Rory starts to roll, I jump over him and my top hook is going to be inserted as part of the roll. And as we continue, I'll insert the other hook as well.
Let's try and get that one a bit from this angle where you have your back to the...
So I've got this, again, let's just say a seatbelt. He starts to roll, my knee comes up over him. I insert my top hook as I go into his hip. You can see my other knee is wedged underneath of him. We continue the roll, and as we continue the roll, I insert.
And the great thing with Rob having that fulcrum is that if that roll can't really be continued, because he's underneath here, it's pretty hard for me to stop him from being able to get that leg out. He just has to turn himself a little bit, and the hook's there. If that knee wasn't, and it was behind me, well, now my center of gravity is lower, it's connected to the mat, and if Rob tries to bring that leg underneath in any kind of way, it's much easier for me to start scooting away from him. So that's where there is a bit more of that explosiveness at the very beginning, where you have to recognize, everything we focused on so far was trying to pull our opponent and break them down and get their back to just fall into us. But we have to recognize if we're losing that battle, know when to fold them and chase.
And chase the back. Yeah, so this movement connects really well. if we had taught this like a beginner series for back control or back attacks 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, it would have looked very different than this. We selected these movements because, circa late 2021, we think that, it's based on what's being hit at high levels of competition, based on what you see being defensively developed with the turtle. These are probably the 3 movements that if you practice them and connect them, I don't want to say you don't have to learn anything else. There's obviously, you got to complete your back attacks game, but if you make this sort of the core of your back attacks, you can't go wrong. You're going to add obviously offense from the back and how to get the choke or the rear triangle or the arm bar. All that stuff is really good. But as far as actually getting onto the back, these are probably the most reliable movements that we're seeing right now.
Yeah, and so just to kind of further iterate some of the ways that connecting these techniques that we've talked about so far, one of the things that I have happened quite a bit against guys that know this power half Nelson is extremely strong is that they know that if I can fold their chin into their head and start to turn their chin out that way, like Rob talked about, so I can drive the head, they're completely shit out of luck. And so what they'll do is they'll actually start dropping already. You can see how Rob's turned his head that direction. Now I can't get my elbow to the mat. We're stuck there. And so as he's trying to drop here, if I just put my foot out here like this, like Rob was saying, Rob's going to end up breaking this down, and I'm still in a great position, but I get stuck in half guard when I could have been attacking the back. So as we're here, as I got this power half Nelson, I still have some cross body control. As he starts to drop himself this way, I'm just going to take my knee, drop it down to the mat, and you can see how even with that power half Nelson, I can do the same motion to just get to the same spot that we would have from breaking him down. I just had to go through a little bit more of a rotation to get into that. Or in the demonstration at the beginning of the video, Rob can go through the whole lead knee wedge. As he's pulling me down this way, I'm able to start denying him the ability to control. I start chasing him up. And Rob's able to chase through and go for the back. And you can see how, because of that dynamic movement, a little bit of a scramble there, Rob was able to start getting his upper body control as I was moving because, as Rob had talked about, there's so much mobility, there's so much movement going on for me at that point. I can't stay with super tight knee elbow connection and effectively move myself like this. I have to have the ability to base and move, and that means I have to open myself up.
This is a really good point to touch on again. I don't know how much we've talked about it before, but the idea that people can seem like they've got good jiu-jitsu or can seem like they're really defensively sound so long as they're not moving.
Yeah.
Everyone is born with the ability to isometrically contract their limbs. It's called the fetal position. So if your defense is no more advanced than the instincts of a mewling infant, chances are you're not that good at jiu-jitsu. You're just really statically strong and you're refusing to move. It's only when we see people actually have to move and maintain defensively sound position and recover and escape and attack that you actually see good defense. And so that's what we're trying to do here is like recognize that people will be really static and just give you ways of breaking that should open them up. But once you do open them up, it's still on you to develop these connections between the movements, because if all you know is one thing, then you're no better than that other mewling infant. That's not what we want to
and
do.
Robin said this is some great groundwork to give you kind of a foundation of being able to attack the turtle, but there's a lot more to this. So either checking out bjjconcepts.net, we have to plug our website on getting some more tools to be able to do that, or following up with other YouTube videos, other instructionals. There's a lot more to this, but this is a sound foundation to give you guys some movements on the 2 different directions that your opponent will move in turtle.